The girl again tried to invite him to dinner to feed him a snail, but he refused, throwing everything off on homework. The main character was an attractive guy, so this girl kept up with him and did not give up trying to slip her snail into him. He couldn't believe that she forced him to send her a photo in the middle of the game. Those words came to his mind again when she asked him to destroy the shell in order to enjoy this moment together and relax. But he didn't like these words because, after all this, he felt uncomfortable next to her and didn't understand how long this would continue. He was sitting and thinking in his room, thinking that he had closed the door, but suddenly his sister appeared behind him, who was interested in whether he had watched his sister's video. The main character was very scared but didn't even turn around so as not to get burned. He was scared because he didn't expect to forget to close the door. The sister decided to enter his room because he did not answer her when she called him, but she suddenly noticed something strange in his hands. It was a snail's protection. She began to be very worried about this question, because at that moment she did not yet know what it was and she decided to snatch it from him. But it was a mistake. At that moment they both fell to the ground and an awkward situation occurred because our main character's turtle, who loves minks, ran out. The main character didn't know how to explain all this, so he still had to sit down and talk to her so that everything would go well. At that moment she didn't care at all because she was thinking about something else. The guy suddenly stopped paying attention to her and it upset her. It was all because he thought that she had already stopped being so timid, but apparently, everything was not as simple as it seemed to him. It all happened because the guy scared her. It was a form of self-defense for moral and physical health. The girl was very worried about the question of whether this guy really hated her so much that he didn't want to let the turtle out into the hole. But he told her that he had no reason to hate her, but she didn't believe him because he was avoiding her. The main character tried in every possible way to avoid this conversation and blamed everything on the fact that this was a simple misunderstanding, and in fact, he loves her. At that moment, she decided to check it out and invited him to go with her to the film so he could prove that it was true. So he agreed. No one suspected what could actually happen in this film because the girl chose him. This film actually turned out to be an educational cartoon in which children are taught to drive a train and how to enter tunnels correctly. During the session, the guy noticed that the girl was very passionate about it and she really liked it because the train cars were long. They were sitting at the back of the theater, so they decided that they could stop hiding and take off their glasses and masks, thinking that they were on a date. The guy hadn't seen her so interested in something for a long time, so he decided to agree with her and they took off their masks. The session ended. They came out of there and were quite happy, and the girl wanted to go with him again to watch a similar film and was having fun. But at this moment, they did not foresee two things when they decided to go to the cinema. Miso was a fairly popular idol who was easily recognized on the street, so they wore masks and goggles when they entered the movie theater building. And also how easily a guy panics, and at this moment can easily lose consciousness due to the stress that happened. Miso and the main character were noticed by fans, and they immediately ran up to her and began to wonder if this was her boyfriend. They attracted public attention, and he started to panic because he thought that because of this, she would now get into trouble. That was the last memory. After that, he woke up in the hospital and immediately remembered his mother, whom he so wanted to see at that moment due to stress. But in fact, it was not his mother who was in the room with him, but his older sister who came to see her stupid brother. He immediately decided to ask her about how her game went, but due to the fact that he was hospitalized, she had to cancel the game. At that moment, he remembered what happened before he went to the hospital and asked what happened to Misu at that moment. His sister got angry and told him to worry about himself. She sent all the other relatives home because only one person was allowed to visit. The older sister was quite disappointed, although she expected that she would not be the first thing to come to the guy's mind when he opened his eyes. At that moment, she thought that it was all her fault, because she was the one who ordered him to stay away from his little sister. She never wanted to be the one who would solve all the family problems, but she had to because her childhood haunted her, and she wanted the best for the younger ones. She was about to call her mother or Miso, but at that moment he stopped her and said that it was not her fault, because she just wanted the best for the family. At that moment, she was very angry with him, because she was jealous of the turtle and was worried that he would show it to some other girl. So then she decided for herself that she would take this opportunity and be the first to take the turtle from him, so that it would remain only for her. As soon as she took his turtle, her eyes filled with tears because the turtle had already become big and she could not contain her emotions. The guy couldn't believe that this could happen because they were relatives and he didn't expect this to ever happen. Her words made him shudder because they made him both embarrassed and happy. She couldn't believe that a turtle could grow to such a size in such a short time, and he only dreamed of something like this in his dreams. The sensations were completely different from those in his imagination, but he still liked it. But the sister was very embarrassed at the moment when he watched her play with the turtle, so she asked him to lower his head. At that moment, the brother began to tell her that this should not happen between brother and sister because they are relatives. Then the sister decided to ask him if it was normal that they saw the animals. At that moment, she was going crazy because before that, she had always treated him like a pathetic brother. But fortunately for her, the turtle turned out to be much more playful than she thought at first glance, and she liked it. At that moment, my brother noticed that she was very worried during the game, so he decided to ask her if it was her first time playing. This question embarrassed her greatly and she didn't want to answer it, so she told him to leave her alone and it doesn't matter. He was surprised by this because he didn't think that the one who always solved family problems would now decide for the first time to play like a normal child. But he didn't understand one thing, namely why she decided to play with such a loser like him. At that moment, she closed his mouth. She answered him that in fact his train did not set off for this, but in order to reassure their mother and Misa. At that moment, he did not doubt for a second that her words were a lie, because he believed her. But even right now, he saw his mother. This motivated him greatly, because before that, he could not imagine her in this place. When he thought about it, she felt that the turtle became much bigger and more active. At that moment, something happened. She was very surprised by this because she did not expect this. But at that moment, he decided that he would take on the role of his father in this game and be in charge. It all happened when he noticed her excited look, which made him eager to play it. She completely ceased to understand what happened to him because of such a sudden change in playing style. Elder sister was holding back at this moment because she was weakening from every move he made in this game. He was so good. But suddenly while playing, the older sister's phone fell out of her pocket, but she didn't notice it. At that moment, her mother dialed the phone. At that moment, she was worried that they could be heard, and that's exactly what happened. What an unlucky girl. The mother was with her younger sister at that moment and did not understand at all that this was happening on the phone. Mom took the phone and tried to hear something in the call, but their voices were barely audible, so the younger sister had time to react. She snatched the phone from her mother and pretended to be trying to hear something, after which she told her mother that she was simply mistaken. Mom thought that she heard Seo Yoon's voice there, but her younger sister calmed her down and said that it was an empty call so that she should go to bed. The younger sister herself, returning to the room, began to think about what these two were doing at that moment during the call. Despite the fact that they were almost burned for what they were doing at that moment, they did not even suspect it. So even at that moment, they continued to play trains with turtles. This time, the turtle standing still was a girl, and the train that increased its speed was a guy. Despite the girl's warnings, he was pretty good at the game. The train accelerated so much in this game that he decided to discover new abilities and started using his hands. The girl at that moment began to simply go crazy because she began to think that he would pull her out of her shell at such a rate. The older sister was worried that someone might enter the room while they were playing, but the nurse was already there. The nurse came there to check on her brother and give him medicine because it was already getting close to time for this. But then at that moment, his older sister crawled out of the room, showing only her head, and started talking to the nurse. Despite the fact that she was in such a situation, the guy was not going to pause the game and continued to only accelerate his train. Suddenly, the nurse recognized his sister because she was a famous athlete, and her name was Ka-jin Seo Yoon. Her little brother knew that even though she was pretending to be calm, mistakes were leaking through her words. He'd never seen her cringe while playing, so that only made him want to continue it even more. The older sister, despite the fact that she liked this game, tried to make the train stop and stop driving. But he wasn't going to slow down the train, because they almost got caught because of her mistakes during communication. And in order for his train to continue to quietly pass in circles, he decided to forbid her to talk at this moment. At that moment, he had a strange feeling because the older sister from his childhood was very scary for him. It was strange because right now he was sitting quietly with her and playing a game that was already nearing its end. The older sister was surprised at this moment because it still seemed to her that the train continued to grow even though they were on the train. And then the first game of trains was over, so they decided to immediately move on to golf, and my sister no longer minded. His sister played golf with him, and his brother was pretty good at it because every ball rolled into the hole. Ball after ball rolled into the hole, so my sister couldn't even believe it and asked for a pause between his hits on the ball. Over and over again after each hit, his desire to win only increased, so despite his own words, he continued to play. It seemed to him that this would never happen again, so he just continued and continued until he was lucky. And only towards the morning, when the sun had fully risen, did he stop this game, by which time the elder sister was completely defeated. The sister who constantly looked down on him now found herself in a situation where they switched places for the first time. Some time passed and he went to his home because he felt good at that moment. His mother immediately ran up to him and started asking him how he was feeling because she was very worried. She was very worried even though he was left in the hospital for only a day, but at that moment he was very ashamed to look into her eyes. So he decided to push her aside and go to his room to sleep after what happened all night. His mother did not understand anything at that moment, but he began to consider himself terrible because after such a night, he did not lose the desire to play. Mom let him go and decided to do household chores because she rarely managed to do anything and devote much time to the children. She was very ashamed in front of Sang-ho because it was her fault that her son was constantly lonely and did not receive attention from her. She was cleaning his room and suddenly found something very strange that made her think. The mother understood that it was wrong, but hoped that her son would not do something similar. At that moment, very scary thoughts began to creep into her head that her son would be caught and imprisoned. She became very tense because of these thoughts, so she decided to double-check everything just in case and went to his room. Sang-ho was surprised when his mom came to his room to talk to him. He sat down on the bed and began to wait with interest for his mother to start a dialogue because he was interested in knowing the reason. Despite this interest, he was still very worried about what happened last night. Then he began to worry about the fact that she was aware of all this, but she began to ask him about whether he had recovered. Mom was worried about him and decided to ask him directly if anything had happened while he was in the hospital. He couldn't look into his mother's worried eyes, so he turned away and replied that his sister was just looking after him. Mom decided to pretend that she believed him, but immediately after that, she showed him the strange thing that she found in his room. As soon as he saw it in her hands, he began to panic greatly and think that he would be kicked out of the house and that his mother would find out about everything. He was about to start making excuses, but she suddenly stopped him and began to explain something. She actually wanted to have a parenting dialogue rather than scold him because she was worried about him. She decided to start caring about his feelings at that moment because she had not thought about it before, because she thought that everyone was happy. But she understood that stealing such things is very bad, so she decided to explain this to him. At the moment, he wanted to tell her that she simply misunderstood everything, but immediately realized that it would be wrong. She was concerned about her son, so she suggested that he help him with everything that was tormenting him at that moment and relax. He was surprised, but then remembered that she had always been like this. His mother was a beautiful actress, so during his school days, many people knew about it and discussed his mother, which annoyed him. Out of envy, many people said bad things about his mother, which he of course didn't like, and he had problems. She was always like this, and even after he had a lot of problems at school, she came to him and talked calmly. With the words that she will always be for him, she reassured him, and this made him fall in love with her. At that moment, he realized that she was again, as usual, trying to help him and doing it because she was worried about him. Then he suddenly decided to take advantage of this opportunity and agreed to his mother's offer to play golf. At first, she was quite embarrassed by his action, but he decided to warm up before playing golf, so he did not start on the hole. And suddenly telling her about it, he began to greatly regret it and wanted it all to be a dream. But his mother understood this and allowed him to play quietly because she believed that it would help him. And just like that, his shameful desires began to come true because his mother treated him with kindness. He couldn't believe that it was normal, but as soon as he noticed her flushed face and ragged breathing, his doubts immediately disappeared. Sonu began to warm up, and his mother thought that he just wanted to feel like a child at that moment. She wasn't going to take away Sunhoo's toy, so she told him that he shouldn't rush. But at that moment, she felt a little strange. Despite the fact that she had already had this, she felt different. She was a little ashamed to show herself like this in front of her son, but she had no choice. Sunghoo was preparing for the game, and at one point decided to try something new. Mom, feeling embarrassed, nevertheless agreed to this and began to help him warm up according to his new method. She very quickly noticed that he was having a hard time warming up, so she started helping with the actual game. Even though he didn't do anything at that moment, he felt like he was in heaven because of his mother. Suno felt like he was in heaven, so he played only on his sensitivity and he liked it, so he lost to her. After the loss, he noticed the situation in which he found himself, and he felt very ashamed of it. It helped him come to his senses. The mother next to him did not talk about anything, and only asked him if he liked the game. She told him that she could help him take a break from hard everyday life at any time in this way. Despite the fact that she remained silent next to him and left his room, now she had a problem because she wanted to play. Sunghoo was very worried about what happened that night, so he couldn't even sleep properly. He wanted to check the time on his phone because it was starting to get brighter outside, and then he accidentally noticed messages from his older sister. He went out to her on the street because she was waiting for him there, and told him to quickly get into the car. Suno was very surprised because she had never done this before, and today she was driving a new car which he saw for the first time. They got into the car and started driving, but at that moment they were a little late because of Sunhoo, who was inspecting the new car. Sitting in the car, Sunho realized that he felt awkward about what happened at the hospital, and he wondered if she felt the same. He knew that she didn't like to drive, so he wondered where they were going, but she kept it a secret. Sungho and his sister went to the golf course to make their imaginary game real, but at that moment Sungho realized that she did it on purpose, and not because she wanted to pass on her experience of the game to him. He thought they might be misunderstood if she continued to teach Sunho to play golf so openly. That's when he found out that she had booked this field for the whole day, but she noticed that he could not concentrate on the game. So after that, they went to a cafe so that he could relax there, and she wanted to feed him there. It was now the middle of the season, so the cafe was packed and she had to sit there in a cap and glasses, but that didn't bother her. She fed him to his fill and was glad that he ate with such appetite, even though she herself did not like sweets. Suno thanked her for feeding him sweets and wanting to make him a happy day. She was surprised that he was grateful for such ordinary things, but she thought it was funny and she really liked it. She then thought that he was not bothered by what happened during the last gaming session, but she immediately blushed due to the fact that she could not stop thinking about it. She was lost in thought at the exit and accidentally bumped into a waiter who was taking drinks to the table, so everything spilled on her. Suddenly, one person in the cafe said her name, but was not sure that it was her because of the cap that was still on her. Immediately after that, she ran away from this cafe, and Sunho remained there and did not even understand what happened at that moment. She returned home and was very upset because she just wanted to create the mood for Sunho at that moment. But she became lost in thought and stopped noticing what was happening next to her, so she almost ended up in the situation like a Miss You. Suddenly, there was a knock on the apartment door, so she went to see who was there and opened the door. It was Sunho who was worried about her because she ran away alone and started looking for her in this hotel. Then she realized that she made him worry because he knocked on every door in the hotel because of her to find her. Suddenly, he decided to pretend that he felt ill in order to give her a gift. This gift was new glasses, which he bought on the way, so that now no one passing by would recognize her. This annoyed her very much because it hurt her pride and made her run after him. She rented this hotel room so that they could play golf in peace, but she felt embarrassed when she thought that only she wanted this. Immediately after she said what she wanted, she became embarrassed and did not understand what she needed to do next after that. And she suddenly got the idea to start the game with a stick. Then he became embarrassed and told her that the stick changed when they were together because of his sister's beauty. She was the first to start this conversation, so he also decided to confess to her that he couldn't stop thinking about what happened between them. Immediately after this, the sister began to warm up before the game, but decided to tease her naughty brother a little. Having started the game, he could not believe that this was happening between them again, but he really liked it and made him want more. So at this moment, he again took all the initiative and began to warm up with her. He asked her to stop because he understood that if she continued to play like this, he would lose to her very soon. But that didn't stop her, so she closed her eyes and just continued playing like that to tease her brother. Thus, after only a couple of minutes, he had already lost to her, and at that moment she had a strange feeling, which she didn't like. She was surprised at that moment because she was anticipating victory with something a little different tasty than this. The older sister wanted to scold him for the fact that he was going to start playing with her without permission, but that was not something she needed to worry about. Because Sunho could no longer be stopped, he couldn't hold back and was about to start the game, so he started. She was surprised by this because he only recently lost to her, and now after a couple of seconds he can play again at full strength. Despite the fact that he lost, the train became longer and began to travel faster, which played on the feelings of his older sister. She was about to scold him for starting the game without paying attention to her prohibitions, but he simply apologized, and then she relaxed. She had new sensations in her head because of what had happened, and she asked him to stop, but he was not going to do it. This strange sensation was associated with the warm-up, because of which she felt the train much more strongly than usual. So while the train was moving along the rails, she suddenly wet the rails with her water. At that moment, she could not believe that this could happen, because she thought that only men could do something like that. Then Sungho replied that he had already seen this, and this happens when a girl likes what is happening, and she forgets that someone is nearby. So at this moment, she starts doing all sorts of stupid things like a child. In her case, she poured water on the rails. She couldn't believe the stupidity that just happened because she didn't want to admit that she liked the game. She was very ashamed at that moment, so she continued to tell him that she simply helped him get rid of the desire to play. She told him that she felt bad about it, so he wanted to fix it and make her love the game. They moved to the bathroom with a toy in case she decided to flood everything again, but they played right in front of the mirror and it embarrassed her. The older sister did not want to admit that she liked this game, so she continued to tease her brother. But he was not a miss. She tried to somehow stop him, because if this continues, she will completely stop thinking during the game and start telling the truth. But he wasn't going to stop until she admitted that she liked this game, because it was obvious from her. He continued to tease her and accelerated the train so that the water from the bottle would pour in, and she admitted it. But the water spilled more and more, and she remained silent. Sung-ho just wanted her to admit that she liked this train, and they would continue to enjoy the game together. Some time passed and he already wanted to stop, because he noticed how she began to shake because of this game, and he felt sorry for her. But then his older sister stopped him and asked if he wanted to play some more, because she liked it very much. This surprised him very much, because he did not expect her to admit this after another defeat in the train race. At the same time, his mother continued to think about what happened recently, and she decided that she also wanted to participate in it.